recording.
You might want Mark's presentation before you.
Yes, thank you.
Oops. And then go back to Zoom and you can.
Oh, can I leave it up? Well,
You can leave it up, but it's still. So, either way,
it's fine.
one of the things we can do is alt tab, push alt tab between things.
Okay.
Into the presentation, just let go, and then it goes back to finish.
Perfect. Thank you.
Y'all good, Greg?
All good. So are you still doing firmware updates on the other one?
Yeah, I will.
All right. Thank you. Can you mute that machine so there's no feedback?
Oh, I'm going to close out the whole page.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting back to order. As a reminder for folks who maybe weren't connected in at the time, we were having technical difficulties with our computer and Zoom session, and so we called the meeting to order and then rearranged the schedule to go into executive session, which if you look at the original agenda was at the end of the meeting. We went into executive session and then just now completed our executive session and it returned to the main meeting. So with that, we will return to the beginning of the original agenda, which is communications. And actually, I guess let's first you had some introductions you wanted to make, so I'll let you do that. Just go.
I do. We just have a couple people I wanted to introduce. They'll be part of. Some of them will be part of the section on the library asset management. So I believe new to the board, we have Jessica Rodriguez, who is a public works senior project manager. She works on Lindsay's team. As does York Detesny, who will also talk about the facility maintenance. Don Galindo is our strategic real estate manager. He'll talk. And then we also have Zoe Clifford from Public Works. So we've got the Public Works dream team here today.
Very good. Thank you. We look forward to hearing from them later on in the agenda. Next up in the agenda is communications, and I believe everybody got a copy of the email from Mark Salisbury from the Citizens for a Library in West Boise with a number of, I think, salient points about the difference between 3-mile radius and 2-mile radius and what other libraries around the country or library districts around the country and how they're approaching it, because that pertains directly to agenda later on the meeting is when we address the facility plan discussion. Why don't we take up more conversation about that as communications have been one that's appropriate for everybody. Okay, great. Moving on then to the minutes of our regular February 11th meeting, I would entertain. And does anybody have any corrections or additions or modifications to it? Hearing none, I entertain a motion.
We approve the minutes as written.
Second.
Roll, please.
Johnson.
Yes.
Plenty.
Yes.
Impera. Yes. Kizanowski.
Yes.
Favor motion carried.
Great. That takes us to our consent agenda. As a reminder, all matters on the consent agenda are considered routine and may be approved in a single motion. Any trustee may ask to have an item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Would anyone like to have anything removed? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to consent agenda.
I move to approve all matters on the consent agenda.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Roll call.
Johnson.
Yes.
Plenty.
Yes.
Impera. Yes. Kizanowski.
Yes.
Favor motion carried.
We have one large gift in the financials on the consent, the items in the consent agenda from the Carnegie Foundation. It was nice. And reminded me, I read a book called Personal Librarian about J.P. Morgan Library and recommend it. It's really a fantastic book.
Great. Wonderful. Well, if I could get the information, I'd be happy to write it.
Oh, That was for the American 250. So we talked about that in, I think the Carnegie Corporation notified all libraries that had a Carnegie building that they would be making a $10,000 gift per building. The check actually came through. And then part of what they asked us to do, and we're committed to doing it, is to send them photos of how we use the funding. We know we'll be purchasing staff shirts, and we'll probably be buying supplemental materials for children's story times closer to July 4th. So that's our plans for that, and we will follow up. They didn't want a formal report, but they requested that people send in photos of celebrations. So we thought, oh, we've got some great ones to have.
Good, thank you for that. That takes us to our reports, and I don't see Kirsten
Yeah, well,
on the screen.
Well, you all went to executive session. Kirsten gave her regrets. She had a conflict as the time went later, so she's not available.
Sorry to hear that, but we do have Meredith with us. And can you hear and see us finally, Meredith?
I can. Thank you for that.
So,
Yeah, I'll keep this short because I know you guys are running behind by now too, but highlights from the past month. Jessica and I had an opportunity to meet and go over several items, so that was very productive. I also met with Celinda Roach, who's our vice chair, and we met for a few hours and went over several things together just to make sure we're moving in the same direction. One of the big topics that we're going to discuss at tomorrow's board meeting is how many events can we support as a group of volunteers? Because some of these fundraisers we are holding are effortless on our part, but some of the ones that get proposed to us by restaurants or breweries in the community require quite a bit of time and attendance because we have to have a game for the patrons to play, like bingo, or we have to go to promotional events throughout the month or two. And so we're going to talk about how much bandwidth we have. And we're also going to be talking about adding some new board members. I think I mentioned that last time. I did have an interesting, I wish Kirsten was still on. I had an interesting proposal from Sockeye Brewing. They have a trolley car. They purchased a trolley car some years ago, and they want to host a book fair this May and sell books. And the library would be the beneficiary of a percentage of those proceeds. So I talked to them and decided to pass that along to Kirsten because it seems like a good fit with the Friends because they have the books and they could have the sale. So I don't know what happened. I introduced the two of them over email, but I assume she's exploring that. It could be really interesting. The money all goes, it all goes to the library. So it doesn't matter if it comes through us. Let's see. We've got a couple pending events. We're going to talk about those tomorrow. I did submit a request for a table at the Summer Reading and Learning Celebration that's at Jump on May 16th. So the foundation will have a table there with some prize drawings that have been donated to us in order to get people to come over and talk to us. And probably the most interesting thing that we talked about at our last meeting, and we'll have an update on this tomorrow. So Google gives ad grants of $10,000 a month in free Google advertising, which is interesting, but it would require somebody to manage that, almost every day. So there is a separate company called Koios who manages search campaigns just for libraries. That's their specialty. It would cost us about $6,600 a year to employ COIOS. And we're going to have an introductory session with them. I don't think the date has been finalized yet, but we want to talk to them more about it. They have a really good return rate with their libraries. They have a 95% retention rate. So the libraries are seeing benefits from these search campaigns. So we can use, what we want to do is explore how we might use search. It would help us get people to come to our events like the Boise Comic Arts Festival, drive traffic to library programs, and it would be really helpful when we're in fundraising season like Idaho Gives or year-end giving to have those keywords in search. So I think that's going to be a really interesting process as we move forward, trying to decide if we can make this level of commitment. I think that's kind of the highlights of what's going on that I think that you need to know about. So does anybody have any questions?
I'll just make a sort of, after having been on the board now for a couple of years, an observation that, and don't take this the wrong way, but I feel frustrated sometimes by the fact that your board meeting is one day after our board meetings, and wondered if we could figure out a way to sync them so that they're, before our board meeting, just so that we can have the advantage of what's come out of your board meeting versus waiting then almost a full month. And it feels like we're a little out of sync.
We are out of sync. I've had the same observation that I'm always talking about what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm adding this to our agenda as we speak.
Thank you.
To see if it's possible for us to move our meetings maybe to Tuesday or something.
I was going to say, and then I understand that we're going to try to get the leadership of the three organizations together and try to see if we can be more on the same, synchronize our efforts a little better, coordinate our efforts a little better. So looking forward to that moving forward.
And if I could just add, I want to thank the foundation for being willing to have these discussions about the Google ad grants. Google will not make that directly available to us as a government entity. They will only work with a 501c3. And so when Siobhan learned about that, she reached out to the foundation asking like, hey, could we have some of these discussions and think about how we could take advantage of this opportunity. And I really appreciate the way that you all have approached it as a learning opportunity as we move forward. So thank you.
Oh, yeah. And thanks to Siobhan for doing the heavy lifting on it. But we're open, it could, if we test it for a year, we have to make a commitment. But, it may very well be worth testing it for a year because, the algorithms have to catch up. So if any of you've done search before, it takes a long time before your search terms get picked up, right? But I think it's worth serious consideration. So thank you for finding it.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mary.
Sure.
Okay, that takes us to your.
Thank you. I have a couple of things I want to highlight for you in my director update today. I do want to start with the Idaho legislative session, which is, we've been continuing to follow and look for legislation that potentially will impact the library. In House State Affairs last week, House Bill 819 was introduced. This is a bill that we have significant concerns about because of how it ignores a longstanding precedent in how public libraries and school libraries select and make materials available for the public. We believe that it inappropriately applies the doctrine of government speech, and that would result in further censorship inside of Idaho public libraries. It updates definition of sexually explicit to really broaden that to include every material that has any type of sexual conduct or content in it. And I think that expanded definition will only exacerbate the issues that we're seeing related to staff time and resources, defending or potentially defending penalties in how people are in what libraries are liable for. And we do think that using the government speech doctrine is inappropriate, as the public libraries, the community expects them to provide a wide range of materials that feature individual voices by authors who publish in their own words and are reflecting a broad range of views, diverse range of views in our community. The hearing on this bill is going to be tomorrow. We are working now with Kathy Grismeyer, who is the Director of Policy and Government Affairs, coordinating with the Idaho Library Association to make sure that our concerns are raised for that committee as they consider this. I have a reminder for everyone who may be listening. We do have our advocacy toolkit at all our locations, which describes how people can get involved in advocating for libraries. It has been updated for the current legislative session, so people can, sorry, this one quoted, but it does have all the current representatives and senators. So if you are interested in learning more about how you can be involved, that is something that we've got available, as does the Idaho Library Association website. Did want to highlight a change that we have made in our packet to the board that you may have noticed. We have reordered what we call sort of the administrative or management reports or division reports. This is the information that we get from our locations and from our teams. And we originally had it sort of in sections around programming and staff development and community partners. We've now worked with staff to be submitting that information tied to our strategic plan. So now you see the activities or the accomplishments in those 4 pillars: expanding access, increasing impact, optimizing resources. We're hoping that that will help as we're moving into more of the work around some of our strategic goals to make that connection a little bit more clear. So that was in the first time we did that in this packet. I want to just preview something that'll happen tomorrow with our tomorrow at this location. It will be the final Writer in Residence workshop for our current Writer in Residence, Kim Cross. She will have a workshop here on pitching and getting published. She's got probably, I think, 40 or so people that have been following her around. I think we'll have to have stadium seating here tomorrow for that work session or that workshop. And then our next Writer in Residence begins on April 4th. And that is Don Zanzanelli, and his first workshop will be on location, language, and imagination. So if you haven't had a chance, highly recommend getting a chance to see one of our Writer in Residence. And then 2 quick save the dates for you all. The Mayor's State of the City will be on Wednesday, May 6th, and I know the Mayor's Office will do outreach to all boards and commissioners, so you can expect to hear that. And then, as Meredith mentioned, we are going to have our summer reading and learning celebration Saturday, May 16th at Jump. So if you get a chance, would love to welcome you. You can see that. And with that, that's my director's update.
Great. Any questions?
Yes. I had a couple of comments. I submitted them in advance. One was about something called the March Division Report. And it was apparently an organizational change in the report you wanted to start implementing, and I didn't quite understand what that was.
Thank you, Brian. That is following my director's report in the packet, we have moved to reordering the information that we provide to the board aligned with our strategic plan. So if you look at page 3 in the packet, Those are those reports.
Yeah.
So, the wording is, I understand, a little confusing. We labeled it administration and management report, and then we immediately refer to it as the March division report.
Okay,
So this is the same information, just in a different structure so that it can align with the strategic plan.
okay. And I noted a lot of activities going on. One in particular caught my attention, the Queer Book Club. And I was wondering whether we want to consider adding additional security at times when the book club is meeting. Just, we've had some problems with aggressive behavior towards members of the library staff. And I thought it might be something to consider. Along those lines, the thought occurred to me, we might want to ask the book club to stick to books within the library's collection so that we don't run accidentally afoul of any of the concerns about harmful material. We believe all of our books in our collection are have no issues with harmful material. It may not be the case if they bring some other book in. So that two thoughts I wanted to just raise about it.
So we have probably in any month, we'll have at least, 12 to 15 book clubs that meet. And they really are, they come about because there is community interest. And so you saw the wide range of different types of book clubs. Those are things that people in the community have asked the library to help with, whether it be, we're going to meet at a local brewery to talk about books. A lot of times it becomes a place where either people decide as a group they want to read the same book, or they pick a topic and then people will bring in different books and they'll share those with each other. I don't have any concerns about any of the books that are being either brought by, a recommendation from a staff person or someone bringing those in. They are the people that are in the book club that are sharing those. Those are not materials that are obscene, and they're not materials that I think we have any reason to ask for people not to bring in a book that they're interested in. The Queer Book Club in particular, we've had it for the last 2 years. We slowly, when we had COVID, a lot of our book clubs sort of disbanded. We're coming back out of COVID, a lot of those have gone in. We've had no issues with them, and I think that is reflective of the community of Boise that really sees the library as a safe place for them to explore areas of interest to them and to find like-minded readers.
All right, so you're thinking no additional security.
I don't believe it's warranted, but obviously as situations change, we'll always continue to look at it. But these book clubs have been going on for a couple of years, and it hasn't been an issue. But certainly appreciate your continued concern about staff safety.
It takes us to item 6, request for reconsideration, which we don't have any again this month. It takes us to policy reviews. So Sarah, welcome there.
Yeah.
Let's say good morning, but good afternoon. At this point. Okay. We are still working our way through section 4.0. It's the longest section of policy that we review. We're to section 4.04 on security. And as a reminder, policy you do weigh in on, and we are requesting a change. So we'll require a vote. The other three pieces we're looking at are regulation and exhibits, and those are for information only. So starting with security, policy 4.04, the only changes that we are suggesting are related to consistency. We've been over the last actually about year and a half, we've been changing over policy from the word patron to users, which to your question, we've been working on it all along as it pops up. And when we create new policy or regulations, we don't use patron, we go straight to user. So for security, those are the suggestions we're making to change patron from users. And then another thing that I realized I didn't get changed last year, we had updated from rules of conduct to code of conduct. So again, for consistency, just changing out the word rules with code. So that's what 4.04 is about.
Is there an ongoing need for both patron and user, or we're just blanket going to user?
Using users because it indicates anybody that uses library services, whether they're a registered card holder, a community member, a visitor. So it's a good, yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Related to that, then looking at regulation 4.04A, that is our code of conduct. We tightened up number 3, service animals for a little bit more clarity. And for number 14, we added as transportation is, there's an evolution of what things people ride to the library. We wanted to include e-bicycles and e-scooters as things we didn't want inside the library. So that was the change for that one. 4.04B regulation, again, it's was updating wording for clarity and swapping out patrons and users. And lastly, the code of conduct expanded version exhibit wanted to make sure that then matched the updated language in the code of conduct. And if you'll remember, this is one piece that was created a couple of years ago to really be people-centered and explaining why we have rules in the library so that everyone can have a good experience. That is everything I have. Does anyone have any questions before you need to do your vote on 4.04?
Very clear.
Okay,
All reads well.
fantastic.
So I entertain a motion to approve the changes as presented.
Second.
Roll, please.
Johnson. Yes. Plenty.
Yes.
Pantera.
Yes,
Numpty.
Yes,
All in favor, motion carried.
thank you.
thank you, Chair. To our library facilities plan discussion. So we're gonna tee this up for us.
Yeah, we have 2 discussions related to facilities. The first is I want to do a little bit of wrap up and sort of next steps following the February joint session with City Council. We'll try to keep that short because I think the majority of this will be new content, and this is where we're going to ask the Public Works Dream Team to come talk to you about asset management, everything from how do we get an asset in to how do we budget for its continued investment. So we'll have that group, but I did want to start with just a quick what we heard in that joint work session. Obviously, Evelyn, you were not at that meeting, so we'll want to make sure if you have any questions or if there's specific highlights the board members that were able to join want to share. I'd love to capture those as we move forward. We're getting there. I will share with you that my presentation really pulls from slides that you have seen before that start with our mission, start with the purpose of the facilities plan, talks about those same, October 25 recommendations that we've been working towards, outlines those next steps. So now that we have finished this, now that we've done that work session in February, we've got 2 more of these steps coming up. So I really want to focus on sort of what we're going to talk about in that April 28th council work session. We will bring to you, this board, in your April 8th meeting, the content that will go into the April 28th. And this is why you'll get a chance to see it on April 8th. It will be what we as staff present to City Council on the 28th. So that's why that one is not a joint meeting. This is really a presentation to City Council from myself and Lindsay, Public Works staff, but you'll see all the content in that April meeting. And a lot of that is because there's a significant percentage of that content that is already familiar to you in the presentations that either I have made, Lindsay's made, or Group 4 has made. This is just really wanting to make sure we're catching up City Council and answering some of those questions that you've been a part of. So my takeaways from the meeting that we had in February with Council, again, we still have, we've got this real strong alignment in the need to invest in our current facilities. Both bodies, the City Council and Library Board, like the direction that we're going with the library service goals and the library site selection criteria. So I feel like we heard, yeah, keep going with this. These are making sense. We didn't have anybody saying, oh, I don't understand this or don't agree. So we're going to keep moving forward with the work we've outlined in that. There was more additional information requested from Council around program selection and attendance. Where do we see service gaps, particularly because of our smaller locations, and then really sort of what's our capacity. I think some of the questions about, can we add staff? Can we, do we have meeting rooms that could be booked more than they are? So some of the questions you've been asking as well, that we are collecting data on. And then Council outlined some additional areas requested for that work session. And this next slide shows what we heard that they've requested, and we're working on the current M&O needs. That's our maintenance operations. What do we need to keep the facilities both beautiful and useful? What growth in our current facilities is needed? So that idea of, if we're looking at adding focus on square footage per capita, how do we start with that? It's sort of our current locations. And then what new facilities would be needed to meet a potential 2-mile library proximity goal, as we discussed. And then again, the opportunities for innovative services. How could we expand reach? We've got some of the sort of non-staffed or potential partnership approaches as well.
And in that last item, will we see some examples of that, how it's been successful in other locations around the country? That would be, I think, helpful versus just sort of generically some ideas.
Okay. Anything else, those of you that were at the work session would want to add or make sure we're discussing? Evelyn, did you have any questions to help you get caught up?
My only question was, I might be remembering this wrong, but if I thought at the January meeting, it was presented that the 2-mile wasn't like that. There was no current standard for proximity for library use, and that the 2-mile was not necessarily a standard to be held to, but now it looks like maybe that's greater.
Well, so a couple things on that. The city currently, and not the library, the city's comprehensive plan and the blueprint Boise, we actually went back and found the first reference to the 3-mile library proximity goal, which was part of the comprehensive plan in 1997. And so that is where the library's facility plan in 2000 was built on that. And that's where we got the 4 branches in the quadrants that they are based on that 3-mile proximity goal. There really isn't a standard set by either, a state library or the Institute of Museum and Library Services or the American Libraries Association. It really is a local, discussion about what makes sense in terms of proximity or square footage goals. And so we have been asked to look at, okay, if the city does then decide to change that proximity goal to 2 miles, what would be the implications of that? And so that's some of the work that we'll bring back in April. And I think it's important for us to look at square footage per capita because of, particularly in Boise, where we see good coverage both with our libraries and Link's libraries. We see users opting to where they want to go because of the services that a library has. And we have, in particular, the storefront rental. We have facilities that are, I think, really small and not able to provide the services that the community expects because the size of the building. So we need to have both.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the discussion is how do we look at proximity, but also library size.
So the only other thing I was going to bring to the discussion is a large part of our conversation over the last 3-4 months has been about our Links partner libraries, and in addition, the Ada Community Library, where we have an even more enhanced relationship because of the funding we provide to them. As we're looking not only at proximity to them, but now with this discussion about square footage of our own facilities, perhaps it'd be helpful to know the square footage of our partner, those other libraries that are within the 2 or 3 mile. We'll just start with the 3 mile radius because it's the broader one. That's sort of helpful too, because it may be that if our goal is to increase both the square footage per capita, that if all of our partner libraries are undersized as well, we may be having it would be helpful to understand that and to see how we may be able to mitigate that circumstance moving forward. Any other discussions, other items, questions? I think it sort of naturally leads into the next item of the agenda. Clearly, once we start looking at facilities, what's available out there, what we can afford, what.
All right. That's a great segue. We will take you up on that and turn this over to Lindsay and team. Oh, could you?
Yeah, thanks. We're gonna have York and Dawn. Just bring a whole drink. Yeah, thank you, Director and Board, for having us today. This did stem from the February meeting. Board member Pantera, who said something that highly alerted me that maybe we could not done a good job updating you all on some of our standard process of asset management. I think we've been looking at the facility plan, big picture stuff for a really long time. So thought it would be a good opportunity to come back to you guys to provide just kind of project updates, as well as I want to introduce some of the dream team here, which is Yorick and Dawn. Yorick will talk about the facilities operations and what he does for the city. And then Dawn, our strategic manager for real estate, will give you an update on the leasing portfolio and specifically this branch and Hollister. So there's our agenda. And I want to start with some definitions because even I get confused, as York will admit for me, but because we always hear these terms, right? And a lot of it's, you hear it more when you're doing like budget build, which are actively in the budget building cycle at the city. And so when we say MRM, we're referring to our major repair and maintenance. So these are planned replacements for major building systems that have reached the end of useful life. And you'll hear more about how we track all that with Yorick. And then we also talk about MEQ. So this is major equipment. So this is fleet and technology infrastructure type of projects. So think courier vans or the auto sorters, those type of things are coming out of that funding bucket. And then deferred maintenance, you all should be very familiar with this term because we often refer to that when we're speaking of the downtown library, which is a good example of a deferred maintenance project, right? It's repairs that have sat way too long and because it was on the chopping block for so long, but so we're updating all of that. And you'll see we don't have a lot of other deferred maintenance in some of the newer facilities because of our MRN program. And then we also talk about capital improvement, which is projects that enhance or expand a facility beyond restoring its original condition. So the downtown library is kind of a unique situation where it's a little mix of both. And then you'll also see furniture and shelving budget items, those are annual requests that the library gets. But we do use some of that funds to support some of the projects that we're working on. So just wanted to start with some definitions. And I'll turn it over to Yorick.
All right, great. Thanks for that. Good afternoon. I'm here to give you an overview of what FSO does. So FSO is Facility Services and Operations. We'll touch on how we do it, and then get into some how we plan for the major repair and maintenance, the MRN. And so, as the name suggests, what we provide as a team is support services to our occupants, building occupants, which we consider our customers, excuse me. And think of room setups, moves, adds, changes, workspace reconfigurations, and any other kind of support along those lines. And then we also do building operations, which is the maintenance, the repair, the management of building services like janitorial, pest control, landscaping, those types of things. We manage around 1 million square feet. It's a pretty diverse portfolio. We have administrative buildings like City Hall, City Hall West. We have some parks admin buildings as well. We have public safety facilities like fire stations, police stations, their training facilities, civic buildings like the libraries. We also do museums like Boise Art Museum and Black History Museum. We don't run them, but we do manage some of the maintenance aspects of those buildings, as well as some historic facilities like the Boise Depot, the Irma Heyman House, James Castle. We do Parks and Rec, some of their buildings like the Foothills Learning Center, Fort Boise Community Center, Senior Center, those facilities, and then also some support facilities like fleet services, communications, records, buildings. So pretty diverse. We have a team of 19 individuals that perform that work. Our field staff's comprised of, we have some electricians, HVAC technicians, some building technicians of various levels, and we recently added also a building automation specialist. So it does a lot of the building control stuff, keeping buildings efficient and comfortable. We do think of ourselves as asset managers, and as such, we manage our assets. We take a life cycle approach to that, which means that we maintain the assets that we do have through regular inspections or scheduled preventive maintenance. When things break, we repair them. So we get them back in, restore them back in working order. And then when they reach end of useful life, we plan for their replacements. And then, of course, our goal is to keep facilities safe, reliable, and functional. So to assist with this, we use what we call an enterprise asset management system. In our case, that system is called ViewWorks. And what ViewWorks allows us to do is maintain inventory of buildings and all the building assets. So this is pretty granular. There's a screenshot of it to the right there, but it's a bit hard to see. But we track everything from the building and building envelope down to pumps and water heaters and in this case here, examples of boiler. For each of those assets, we track pertinent information, what we call attributes, which includes things like the nameplate data, make, model, manufacturer, but also life cycle expectancy, installation date, and current replacement value. So what that allows us to do then is so we also use that system to assign work to these assets. Again, some of that scheduled work, whether it's preventive maintenance, scheduled inspections. When we perform corrective maintenance, we attach the assets to the work order, which gives us a maintenance history for those assets and gives us a sense of how much those assets are costing us. And then we can monitor asset conditions and also support the repair and replacement planning, which is really in large part the focus of today's conversation. So how this applies to libraries. So libraries are a relatively newcomer to our portfolio. In FY23, we had a consolidation of facility maintenance groups. So some of the libraries and about 8 or 9 parks facilities were rolled under the FSO purview. And so we've kind of spent the last few years really, I kind of look at that as our learning curve for these buildings, right? So we came into it not really knowing what we're dealing with, but over the past few years we've gotten a better sense of that, and we've learned that these are high use facilities that are very public facing. And as a result of that, then the wear and tear is just a little bit, goes a little bit faster, which translates into the frequency of, like, say, refinishes, for example, has to be sped up to meet the need. And we've also got to know I would say we're in a great place now about understanding the actual assets that are in the building. We just completed, we hired a consultant to help us with an asset data collection effort for our entire portfolio. It was largely triggered by the consolidation work, but they went all our facilities, collected the data, and we were able to get that data uploaded into ViewWorks, which now allows us to understand what assets we have, when they need to be replaced, maybe some that for whatever reason, priority or budget, may have not been replaced, but maybe should have been. So that's the deferred maintenance. We use the current replacement value to help us then plan for capital renewal. Which so speaking of capital planning, we really break it down into 3 parts. We have replacement, recapitalization, and improvements. And so what I just touched on has to do with the number 1, asset renewal and asset replacements. This is more looking at individual assets like a chiller, boiler, or electrical switch gear. And then I think what Lindsay will touch on a bit more is the recapitalization or the reinvestment that we're doing in our buildings, which includes refreshing interior finishes or replacing systems as a whole. So a lot of renovations. So the first floor remodel of downtown library is a great example of this, where we're not only, that's a whole floor gotten replaced. And then we also factor in some improvements. So think of lighting upgrades, which we've done here in this library and a couple of the others. If we're going to install new EV chargers, for example, or increase energy savings, those are all things that we also would budget for in our capital renewal plan.
Can I also just guess in terms of then, as the city's looking at its budgeting, the priorities go in those areas where, if you can go back a slide. Oh, yeah. So that in group 1, if the roof needs to be replaced, that's a higher priority to address than would be number 2 or number 3 items.
I think that's a fair statement. I think they're not mutually exclusive, however, and some of them go hand in hand. We have aging lighting systems with technology that becomes obsolete. So sometimes that will trigger, a systems replacement, but also lead to efficiencies.
Sure.
And some, you can go the other way, justify those efficiencies as well. to reduce your operational expenses. So, but yeah, I think it's fair to say, well, I think that's up to the city's direction, and I think a lot more attention is being called to maintaining existing assets as opposed to, undertaking other projects. But yeah.
Yeah. Downtown library, the first project was the roof. So, the envelope is a big part of the picture, so it's definitely a high priority.
Continue.
So what this all means in terms of library specifically and the major repair and maintenance planning and budget forecasting is what the data is telling us is that first bullet points that over the next 10 years we can expect to invest $3 to $4 million for just asset renewals, stuff that's aged out, needs to be replaced. In addition to that, when we build our budgets, we build in some additional dollars for improvements and finish upgrades. We work closely with library leadership on that, and we plan it. We budget it for our entire portfolio, and then we prioritize the dollars based on projects that we have out there. Is our current way of doing that, and we also as Lindsay will dive more into, is integrate some of these MRM projects into the renovations or modernization projects that we do.
Yeah, and this graph here correlates with the appendix that we've talked about in our facility planning, right? It's looking at our owned buildings, so just the main Colon, Ustick, and Bound. So those are slivers of where we're going to be anticipating funding based on the outdated assets.
So can I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but so first, one of the priorities that was raised in our listening sessions in terms of facilities was for the not just the to own facilities, but our lease facilities as well, was this problem of quiet zones for people doing research, and then the kids wanting noisy zones so they can do their singing and other kinds of noisy activities. And so that's a high priority for us to address that. Yet it's not something's broken in the sense of a roof needs repaired, etc. So how does that rise up into the priority list? And it gets addressed, even though it may not be that there's something broken needs to be fixed, as it were.
Yeah, and I think we'll get into that with just some of these project updates, but we definitely, take all that into consideration. And as we're forecasting and planning projects, those types of renewables, even in a lease phase, we are going to have to take into consideration as well to get funding.
So those are considered in this graph that I'm looking at now with 2027, 2028, 2029, et cetera, that you're looking at. Some of those things are going to be addressed in those.
No, actually, this graph is actually for the asset replacement for
only asset.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll need additional budgeting to accommodate capital projects.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Nope, that's great.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is this now built in or going to be built into the regular city budget process? Okay, that's for some reason I had understood that this was no longer in the budget at all for some reason, but that sounds not the case.
Right. Yeah. That's why we wanted to come to talk to you all, so you can rest assured that.
I can swear someone said that to me from the city, but I must have misunderstood.
Yeah. The budget gets squirrely, so it gets confusing.
Yeah, I definitely thought that the regular repair costs were somehow now not budgeted for. So
Let the record show.
You were not alone, Nikki, in having this perception.
Okay, well, I feel
also-
better now.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
No, this is a annual activity that we do, planning, and not only for libraries, but all of our portfolio, for sure. Okay, so just a reminder. Just a reminder, we're under construction at the first floor, which is why we're meeting here. So again, when we talk about the downtown library, we are talking about deferred maintenance. So we're doing total building system replacement, HVAC upgrades, the plumbing, the electrical. The first floor is really focused on the youth service upgrades, and thanks to our donation from the Friends, able to get a little bit more done than we had planned originally, which is great. We also are always doing ADA improvements when we're touching facilities to make sure that we're inclusive of all. And with this, we're going to have an updated information desk and some additional programming space.
Lindsay, I have a question. In February, we were looking to fix a week of closure for the electrical system upgrade. And I saw, I think in this month's material, we fixed the dates on the 3rd to the 10th of May.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, are we highly confident? Because before we publicize a big closure, I don't want to have the risk that we have to reschedule the closure because the electrical system upgrade wasn't ready.
Yep. And that's on the agenda later for a board approval, I believe. But yes, I'm looking to my friend Jessica, who she's supporting the downtown project now as senior project manager. And so she's been working closely with the library leadership team. And we are very confident that date is set. And agreed. We don't want to have to reschedule that. Okay, so this is when we get into the MRM CIP conversation, and some future projects that we want to make sure we're going to be budgeting for as we move forward. But a reminder, we still have some current projects in the works, as well as the construction on the first floor. We have the elevator replacement modernization. That'll be happening this year into next year, potentially, just figuring out best way to approach that. And that is MRM dollars. The exterior facade and windows, that'll be bidding out this spring. That's just been sort of not as much of a priority. So we've pushed this off a little bit just to kind of see how all the funding is shaking out for current budget. And then the parking lot project, I know we've presented on that before, but we've gotten to a schematic design level, but we're moving actively into moving that project through design. And we'll be getting the funding for that in the FY27. So October 1st, hopefully have that funding secured. And then future projects, this is now when York and I and the teams are working together to make sure that we're budgeting for replacement cycle of carpet and paint, the second, third, and fourth floor. This is so that we can align with the new first floor standards, some of the back of house work we've been doing. So working together to get those into the budget builds. Still need to complete the fourth floor updates. There's lots of spaces that are not used efficiently. And then, of course, we keep talking about with the facility planning, wanting to relocate ATS, admin, courier service, and then free up those spaces to remodel and repurpose for additional programming, collections, and community meeting spaces. So that will need to be part of the prioritization budget builds in the future.
So clearly not FY27, but perhaps 28, 29.
Correct.
Timeframe.
Correct. And that a lot of that information we're going to dial in for the April board meeting so that you guys have an understanding of that before we go to counselor. I should have left some of these MEQs and MRMs off on some of the slides. I know, but I could have done a quiz. I'm sure you guys are really tracking, but so Cole and Eustick, just a reminder, we've completed the auto sorter installation. That's MEQ dollars. We did additional workstations to support the new staffing model. That was furniture dollars. The bird strike mural installation was MRM. The lighting upgrades York team does is MRM. And then the ADA upgrades that we did were part of a CIP. So that's a capital improvement. And we have an ongoing budget request every year for 425,000, I think, so that we can continue chipping away at some of these ADA upgrades for the whole portfolio. And in the future, as it's been identified in the facility plan, we'll need to plan for some remodels of inefficient use of spaces. And this is to address your point, right? We need to provide quiet zones and more active zones and sound mitigation solutions. Bound crossing, so moving into this year, this fiscal year 26, we have a auto sorter using MEQ money. That's on order and anticipated to be installed in June. There wasn't as much renovation needed for this particular auto sorter, so that's kind of a plug and play, which is nice. Freed up some funds to do the bird strike mural, which is anticipated in May, and then we are also doing a new information desk to be ADA compliant, even though that's a relatively new building, but we are replacing that. It will also just be a lot more useful for the staff, the way it's being reconfigured. And then again, for future, we want to be tracking sound absorption, design, and install to support that space. And again, remodeling some of the inefficient spaces that are just not getting used the way the original design intended for them. Wanted to put this in here to just address some of the property constraints that we have right now. We've talked about the bound crossing and the colon U stick. There's, I think we've been asked the question a few times, like, why can't we just expand these existing facilities? But wanted to talk about how that's not really realistic or possible at this point, because the original designs really were not intended to be expanded. There's a lot of site boundaries, adjacent development, adjacent roadways, parking, fire, emergency vehicle, service drives that we have to maintain, and then just the nature of the design and the landscaping to retain all the stormwater. That's why we have those bioswales and some of those outdoor spaces. So just, it's not really a viable option. Of course, in 50 plus years, potentially, if the city grows, we could demo the buildings and build some sort of vertical project, but we didn't even put that on the slide because that's real aspirational. And then moving into our lease portfolio, we'll segue to Don for his update, but we are doing projects there. We've completed York's team with MRM funding, budgeted for LED lighting upgrades and controls. These are things that we can control as utility bill paying folks, and also just wanting to make sure that we have efficient buildings where we can. And then in this year, we're working on a workstation upgrade for some more efficient furniture for the staff. And then in that area, taking advantage of the time when the furniture gets pulled out, recarpeting that area with MRM dollars. And that's all anticipated in April. Hillcrest, this building, we've completed the LED lighting upgrades and controls. And then just as a reminder, this space up ahead, the step ahead, was vacated. They moved out. They were able to use that for programs for the downtown library. So eventually we'll want to budget to remodel the space and incorporate it somehow into the flow of the whole branch, since it's been designed as sort of a standalone space.
So is stuff nowhere in the library facility?
Yeah, my understanding is they, as an organization, disbanded.
Huh?
They closed. They closed as an organization.
Do you guys have any other questions on projects as they relate to the library system as a whole?
Questions about BC, but that's about to get into. I saw the next slide.
Spoiler alert. Don only has one slide. We've made him cram it all in.
One slide, many questions. I like it. Yeah. So pleasure to be here. I'm the city's real estate manager. I support each department's real estate needs. So that's really the portfolio is any real estate that the city owns, controls, or occupies. So today I'm providing just a brief overview of the two lease locations that the library has, which is Hillcrest and Hollister. And because these facilities are leased and not owned, our time is limited in duration because of the lease nature of that occupancy. And inside of those leases, we have critical dates, which are option exercise dates. And over the next 18 months, these dates are going to be approaching and we'll need to make a decision. The Hillcrest leased option must be exercised by August 1st of 2026. And also I must mention too, there's a window in which you can exercise these dates. This is the opening of that window. So you would have a period of usually it's 60 to 90 days after that. But these are the opening of those option exercise dates. And then the Collister will be June 4th of 2027. Each location, we have 2 5-year options. And for each, it would be exercising 1 5-year option. So to extend for another 5 years. What would change material would be the rent or the rate that we pay. So Hillcrest, the base rent rate it's $14.66 per square foot. In the option, it's a fair market value reset. So the landlord is going to send us essentially a renewal offer, and we'll have a chance to respond. There's a give and take for potential negotiation, depending upon where that opening offer is. For Collister, it's very different. We pre-negotiated those leases when that lease was originally signed. So that's already a preset rate. So currently that's at $13.15 per square foot per year, and then that would raise to $13.41 per square foot per year. And when in evaluating, our options and what we would like to do, it's always important to consider, current market conditions and possible, replacement options that would be available in Boise's retail sector. That's the asset class that the library occupies, is retail. So over the past decade, retail lease rates have risen year over year over year. And that's been due to not a lot of construction and vacancy declining. So not a lot of supply, but certainly demand has stayed steady, if not increased. And then another challenge is just the size of space that we occupy. It's a little bit larger than your typical tenant. So a majority of available space that's out there is going to be kind of that sub 5,000, maybe even sub 2,500. And that just wouldn't do for what we would need to occupy. So space is limited, options are limited. And then also, given all of that, the recommendation would be that we would exercise our options and give us the time to have the facilities planned, finalized, and also gives us the time as well to look into the future of any replacement options. And ideally, proponent strongly, especially for the department, the library, is to be an owner user of our space. We can just control our destiny a little bit more. Any questions?
So 2 thoughts, 2 questions. One has to do with sort of back to the capital improvement component of lease space, which I have to say is I'm used to working with the state buildings and leases, where virtually all of the costs of capital improvement is borne by the landlord and built into the lease rates. Whereas it seems that the city is almost just the opposite. If you're replacing everything, including carpeting, it's your responsibility, let alone new roofs and everything. It seems that it's a very different calculation. You sort of speak to the rationale for why you approach it this way versus that. Is that the difficulty of the ease of finding capital money
Yeah.
versus the state, which is
Yeah.
easier to find
Um,
money. I'm just trying to understand the thinking.
No, definitely. I mean, that's so one of the benefits to leasing versus owning is that initial capital outlay, whereby you would need to have a pretty substantial capital to buy and invest in a building, whereby if you were to do it as you speak, it's treated as a tenant improvement. And you would get that tenant improvement allowance up front to invest in space, but it's treated as a loan and amortized through the rent. That's at the initial lease signing, and as far as I know, you can't kind of go back and go get more, so to speak. So we could certainly see if we could ask and see if we could get that as part of our renegotiation, because everything is on the table. But yeah, that's when it would be time to ask and negotiate for that.
Said, what is the thinking of why you would do it or why you would not do it? Is it a function of whether the city has capital funds to invest at this point versus we don't have any capital funds, you really need these improvements. Let's figure out how to negotiate and build it into the base rent. That's fundamentally the thinking
Yep.
here.
Yep.
Right. Then I guess I would, so makes sense to me in terms of where we are. It seems like a pretty big jump for this versus the jump for Hollister.
Yes, we're going to be the benefit of those pre-negotiated options, whereby for this location, landlord just did not want to do that. I could see why they would not want to do that, as you can see with Hollister. And that's just an estimated rate. That's where current market is. It's unknown where that will come in. And that's also worst case scenario, I'd say. So I'd expect it to be much lower or lower than that. Hopefully much lower.
But I guess as we approach it, right, if we do identify some projects that we want to get negotiated and when we start this window, right, if we want to consider, okay, we want to renovate this space,
Yep.
potentially that could be part of the conversation. But really that's looking at a new space if we were to find a space that we wanted to take over in another location or expand, move from some of our current locations that are undersized. If we wanted to find a different Hillcrest or a different Hollister, when we're starting those conversations, we would probably entertain like, okay, let's assess the condition of the space and what we think the square footage or the cost per square footage to renovate, to bring it up to a civic building. That's when we would try to have those conversations to negotiate. And then, the M&O budget that the library does with the budget team would then have to account for that annual rent.
So I recall some months ago, maybe even a year ago now, the conversation about the space directly next to us here and the cost. I bring this up because it was the cost to bring it up to usable space, right, was astronomical, and the landlord was not going to cover any of it. It was going to be entirely borne by us, which made it irresponsible to go in that direction, perhaps. Being editorializing a little bit, but didn't seem to make sense.
Yep. Yeah. And we did revisit the space recently again, just to see how they finished cleaning up the space. It's pretty much in the same condition, just minus some gym equipment. And so, yeah, again, if we were to entertain taking over that space, that negotiation of the cost would be part of those conversations. And we gave it a rough order of magnitude of the cost per square footage to renovate. But again, it's a long space with very limited daylight. So just not deal for a library setting.
I know we're running way over time. I will just turn to my colleagues. Are we okay? Guys? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Trying to be really, I think. The only other comment I would say is as we look at two spaces in particular to consideration of West Boise, I would I wonder if you guys want to speak to the availability of anything in terms of lease space and what you know, full build, but in terms of lease spaces, 25,000 square foot in larger area.
Yeah, I mean, the options are rare. But when they do come up, you know, I mean, I'm searching daily, and it is certainly an active assignment, you know, that I'm searching. But just, yeah, space of that size is rare.
The only thing I would jump in is that, you know, Hewlett Packard just announced they're leaving Boise. It's a huge building. I know it's owned by the state now, but is going to become
Yep.
vacant,
And
and whether or not the state says, I'm gonna keep it for ourselves and move yet more departments into there, or whether they would be open to management with us.
Yeah.
So I think if we work at.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a conversation.
opportunities,
Don't
of
come up
course.
very often.
They don't, but they do, because there's certainly moving parts. So it's just being readily to action and make a move. I think that's part of it too. So getting the direction that we are ready. And if something does come available, we can make the steps to secure that space.
And that would be ready with funding.
Yes.
Just to clarify, Mike, how does that fit into the budget?
Mhm.
That looks, I don't know if it's a capital, I just don't know how like either land acquisition or lease costs fit into the overall budget.
Yes, we're presenting in April to you and the council, just some of these options to
Okay.
gear them up for understanding these costs that we're anticipating. We'll probably provide some case studies on, okay, this is what we need, and this is how much it'll cost to renovate, and then staff, fill, operate. But then once we have alignment, I think it's the June board meeting or the council meeting we're going back to, and that's really where we're hoping that we can align on the prioritization and the funding needs and the next steps for them to then put it into the capital plan.
You're right. It sort of, depending on which way you go, it does come with the budget, right? The
Yeah.
leases are in our M&O budget. Purchasing land is in actual constructing is different. So it is
Although the amount of, unless you're gonna put those funds or put those improvements against the landlord, you have to have a heck of a lot of capital planning as well.
you're correct. So it's usually a combination with different percentages based on the individual project.
Other questions?
I think I can ask more in April.
It sounds like we'll have another opportunity in April.
Well, I really appreciate the public works team coming, because this is the real advantage of being part of a city where I don't have any expertise in leasing. But we certainly have that on our, to call it on and say like, hey, help us. And so we've spent time going in, actually looking at stuff. So he spent more time understanding, when I look at a building, what eyes do I have in terms of, okay, this is where we need the windows, or this is where we would want to have materials come in. And then obviously York and his team in terms of like, I don't want to know how to put a roof on the building, but I would like a roof that doesn't leak. It's great. So it's a really good partnership, and I really appreciate the work that they've done to understand our business. I think York saying these are really heavily trafficked buildings, and so they have really thought about, okay, how are we doing replacement cycles faster, and how are we making sure that we're responsive every hour that you're open, not just the hours that City Hall works. So I really appreciate the opportunity to learn from and with
works through this. So I didn't take this offline, but just I'd be interested in terms of, I'm sure with, you're building fire stations and you're building police stations and whatever, very specialized facilities in which you would need to be either bringing in consultants who have that expertise or training your own staff up to become experts in how do we design and build a new fire station. I wonder whether you have, how you are thinking about the specialized needs of libraries as in terms of your own training or bringing consultants to help you as you're thinking about, well, how do we turn whatever X former grocery store into a library that meets the needs of the community. Just really quickly to that, and then I know I'm texting my fellow board members.
Yeah, I think the project team relies on essentially consultants with those types of expertise to design those types of places or spaces. I've sat on a lot of like construction design teams for fire stations, and we support that effort in terms of what the building systems that we like to see, the type of technology, those sorts of things. But even our team designed an exhaust extraction systems, which is a specialized system for fire engines, and just because it was cheaper and easier for us to maintain. So we're engaged in the process with design professionals that actually take the lead.
Anything else? Thank you so much for your presentation and your great work.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to new business. Give us the update on the closure of the
Emily,
library. Emily.
Hey. Hello, everyone. I thought Brian was gonna steal my thunder there for a second, but I am here to talk a little bit about the closure for the electrical work at the downtown library. In July, we came in front of the group and talked about the project that's happening on the first floor. Part of that work is replacing the electrical system to the building. At the time, we actually thought we were going to have to do a couple of short closures and then one long closure. So I come bearing good news that CMCO and our subcontractor Power Plus has been able to be really creative in some of the pre-work and actually do some of the electrical work after hours, which means we do not have to do a couple of short closures. That work has happened on Sundays after we closed. So they were really creative in how they could do that. So we're able to avoid those shorter closures. So I'm here today to just request board approval for the one long closure so we can actually switch over all of the electrical gear to the new switch panel.
Close enough.
Close enough. So as mentioned, we have identified the dates of May 3rd through the 10th to close. We are working on communication for the public and staff and what everybody will be doing during that time, but no power in the building means it's not safe to operate. So we are requesting board approval to close for May 3rd. Did I say March earlier? Anyway, May 3rd through the 10th to accommodate that electrical switch.
And just to be clear, those include those days 3 and 10.
Correct. We would reopen on the 11th. Yes. The other locations will stay open during that week.
I hope we approve the closure board.
second.
Roll call, please.
Johnson.
Yes.
Plenty.
Yes.
Pantero.
Yes.
Kuzinski.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carried.
Okay, thank you. So are you available to do the
Sure.
payment vouchers? Can everybody make the April 8th meeting? You said you cannot, right? But the three of us can, maybe.
There's an accreditation visit that day and I don't have a schedule of if I need to be at anything, so I'll let you know if something comes up, but hopefully.
Okay. And typically, yes, if we find out whether she can,
Yep. We'll reach
Just
out.
in
I'll be-
case.
just in
Yeah,
case.
we'll reach out.
Yeah, just, it would be great to know for sure that we have 3 people for a quorum. If we know we can't get 3 people, then I think we should consider. Schedule.
Yep, we'll reach out.
Okay, sounds great. Then, we took care of executive session already, so. If there is any further business before the board. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thanks. Thank you very much. We are adjourned. And thank you all for your patience with the technology and with this latest rewind.